So are we ready? Here we go. So welcome back to the Midlife Momentum podcast. I am excited today. I've got a new guest on the podcast. Her name is Dr. Camilla Moore. She's a distinguished expert in holistic health, stress management, and burnout, which is one of the big reasons she's here today. She has 16 years of clinical practice as a doctor of chiropractic, and she's board certified in lifestyle medicine through the American Academy of Lifestyle Medicine. She's also a registered yoga teacher, like me, and a certified clinical instructor for the Stress Management and Resiliency Training Program, or the SMART program, which was developed by the prestigious Benson Henry Mind Body Institute at Massachusetts General, which is an affiliate of the Harvard Medical School. And she's a regular guest lecturer at Brown University Medical School and a corporate wellness consultant for major companies, including Titleist and FootJoy. So Camilla's obviously a very busy woman, and I'm so happy that she's here on the podcast today. So welcome to the podcast, Camilla.
Thanks, Debbie. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. And so I'm just going to ask you to start by telling us about your journey to becoming now a burnout expert.
Yeah, it's one of those things. If you had told me that this would be where I ended up, like, I'm not sure whether I would have necessarily seen this path, but it's where I ended up. I started, I had my private practice for a few years. I sold it in 2018. And my husband and I had been trying to have a family for a few years before then. And we were just kind of hitting this crossroads. And when you're in business, you either keep growing or you sell. And so we decided that maybe, let's sell, take it down a notch. And we really started trying to have a family, a lot of fertility. And we did. And we had my son in 2020, which was the height of the pandemic. And at that time, I was working for a major health system here where I am in Rhode Island, and running the chiropractic department there within the lifestyle medicine department. So we worked all through COVID. I was pregnant through COVID, had my baby through COVID, sent him to daycare during COVID, a lot going on. Just me and my husband, because we were totally isolated from all family and friends. And it was hard. And I started really thinking about shifting what I wanted to do. I loved my hands-on work. Physically, it was very difficult. And I had this new family that I wanted to be able to spend some time with. So I started exploring other things. I'd always worked with meditation. I had a meditation coach for many, many years, just one-on-one. And really, that resonated so deeply. I thought, let's just be a little more authentic with this. And I found, I got my board certification, and I found the SMART program through Mass General, and that just clicked. All of it just clicked. And I thought, this is what I want to do. And so I started getting that certification, and I did. And they ended up restructuring our entire department where I was working. And I had the choice of either jumping into this or continuing practicing, and I decided to jump. So here we are. I went through my own burnout after that, as I kind of crashed from the years of fertility and COVID, and just pushing through. And I've learned so much just through my experience, but also academically, of how to actually identify some of those things and work through it. And at the same time, which I think your listeners can relate to, I hit perimenopause, at a wall hit me. So all of these things kind of came in at once. And it was really challenging to try to extrapolate what was what, so that I could determine what helped what. And so that's really, I've learned, again, a lot from that experience, but also just reading and researching and teaching about it too. So that's how I ended up here.
Wow. Yeah. Just listening to that, I think I'm having a burnout. But
Yeah,
I think
it's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. And like you said, going through COVID, and I think that probably instigated some burnout for a lot of other people as well, just the complications of COVID. But in your case, having children through that time and then changing careers through that time. So many things that are already stressful events, but then, on top of each other is very challenging. So I appreciate that you're here talking about it. So we do tend to associate burnout. I've always associated burnout with the workplace. You always talk about somebody who's
Mhm.
burnt out at work, but you're talking about there's other elements here. So
Yeah.
where can burnout show up for us before we go into the perimenopause part? Because I'm really interested in that. But
Yeah.
I just want to understand, when you say burnout, what does it mean, and where can it show up for us?
So burnout has traditionally been associated with workplace. And more specifically, when they really started looking at it in the 70s, it was with caregiving professions, nursing, physicians, people that were really giving in their work. So it has traditionally um, been viewed and studied within the workplace. What I can tell you from my work and working with my clients, and speaking with my patients over, the last couple of decades, life has changed so much. And I think, especially for women, life has changed so much that a lot of the principles that determine burnout within the workplace can be very easily transposed into other types of relationships. And so if you look at work as just being an area where you have relationships and you're contributing, that is just a community, like your family is a community, like your greater neighborhood is a community, or your church is a community. But I want to take a step. I want to just define a few terms that I think will be
Hmm.
very helpful going forward. So we have three different terms that sometimes are used interchangeably, but are actually very different. So we have stress, we have chronic stress, and we have burnout. So I just want to talk a little bit about what the differences are so that your listeners can maybe have a little bit more insight into what they're experiencing. So stress is supposed to be a short-term event. It is a survival mechanism. We are supposed to encounter something that we perceive to be a threat, evaluate that threat based on what we have learned about it before and what we know, we think about how dangerous it is, and then respond to that threat and then recover from that threat. So it is inherently a normal process. Stress is a very normal physiological process and is a way that we've been able to survive for the past 10,000 years. We are supposed to be able to recover from that short-term stressful event. So just think about, for an example, if you're driving and someone cuts you off, right? Instantly, like everything heightens, like you start sweating, you grip the steering wheel, like you can feel that stress. But as soon as that car just keeps passing you and going along his merry way, you can recover from that. And your heart rate comes down, your breathing gets better, you loosen the grip on your steering wheel, and you can recover. And by the time you've gotten to where you are going to be, your body is back to baseline. So we call the ability to respond in a healthy way resilience. When we talk about resilience, that's what we mean. And so the factors that go into that are things like, have we had enough sleep? Have we eaten our fruits and vegetables and whole grains and good fat? Do we have people around us that are supporting us? Are we not drinking a lot of alcohol? Are we not smoking? So the healthier this system is, our body, the easier it is to recover. Chronic stress is when you have either a bombardment of stress and you're unable to manage that effectively. You're not able to recover from that effectively. Or you have one significant stress and you're unable to recover from that adequately. But with chronic stress, it's really a lot of stress over a long period of time, or a little bit of stress over a long period of time. And when we see that our body is not able to recover from each of those instances, it accumulates in a way that can cause illness and disease. And we see this. It makes sense based on what our fight or flight response is, the stress response. If you take that and just put it on steroids, it makes sense. So you have weight gain, weight loss, metabolic issues, you have major adverse cardiac events. This is where you really get into some of the diseases. There was a study that was done, I believe, out of the University of Pittsburgh 2 or 3 years ago, where they determined that stress was an independent risk factor for major adverse cardiac events. So what that means is that if you were doing all the right things, if you were eating well, if you were exercising, if you were getting all your sleep, all of those things were done very well, but you had increased stress, that alone increases your risk for major adverse cardiac events. So like heart attack and stroke. So when we
Okay.
talk about chronic stress, what we're really talking about is the accumulation of stress over a long period of time where our body has not been able to adequately recover.
Mm.
Burnout is much more emotional. So burnout is a state of physical and emotional exhaustion, and it is tied more to our sense of well-being and our sense of community and our sense of belonging and our sense of purpose. So if you are in a situation, if you're in an environment where your relationships mean that you don't feel like you're seen, or you don't feel like you're heard, or you don't feel like you matter, who you are as a person that you bring to that place is irrelevant, then that is really beginning to formulate a place for burnout. And so that's why I say, like, it's not just a workplace issue, especially with women, because we have significant relationships outside of work where that can actually happen. You can have those building blocks where you don't feel seen, you don't feel heard, and who you are doesn't seem to matter. And we see this more and more with women. It's not that you took the kids to school. It's that you had to change your morning. You had change your morning to make time for that. You had to make the lunches. You had to deal with the traffic. You had to, adjust course because the 3-year-old didn't want to get dressed. It's all of those things that led up to that matter. And you need a partner that can see that part of it. And if they only see the task that was done, then you're going to start feeling that you don't matter. And even though you were able to get the task done, you're going to start really feeling depleted inside. And so when we talk about burnout, what we're really talking about is, do we matter in our relationships? Does what we bring to the table, is that acknowledged? And is it appreciated? So those 3 different categories are really important to understand the distinction so that we can communicate effectively about what's going to help them.
Wow. That was amazing. That was an amazing breakdown of stress, chronic stress, and burnout, because I do think we don't know the difference between them. We say them interchangeably, but what you just said is so clear and makes so much sense. And so we're talking about burnout here, and I've talked about chronic stress in the past, but what you just said about burnout is very intense and very impactful. And it really has to do with us as a person, us and our belonging in this world. And it's so deep. I think burnout
Very
just
much
sounds
so.
so
That's a great
deep,
word
right?
for it. It is.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. Because it goes
So,
to the essence of who we are and what we want to contribute to our time here. It
yeah.
really does start there. And if what we're giving isn't received and acknowledged, then we're just gonna keep giving and giving and giving. And without that acknowledgement, we're gonna get depleted. And that's
Okay.
where you can see all of those other symptoms. Lack of motivation is a symptom of burnout. Cynicism is a symptom of burnout. Loss of purpose and meaning. I mean, these all make sense with that framework of understanding.
Oh, yeah. No, that definitely makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm just curious based on what you just said, actually, it
Yeah.
just was a question that came into my head is, do we need other people to
Mm.
recover from burnout? Like you're saying, it's relationships and we're looking for validation. We're looking for people to truly see us. But if we don't have a partner or we don't have those people necessarily telling us this, can we do that ourselves?
It's such a great question. And yes, because you have to identify, there's so many things that can fill us up as human beings. And identifying what really moves you is a very good place to start. And one of the exercises that I do with clients is, we take a look at where you are right now, right? And like, what are the aspects of your life? And then along the way, what have you felt that you have had to sacrifice? Not so much, give up, but what feels like a loss that you lost. And what that can do is give you insight into what you're missing now. And so
Mhm.
we are community oriented creatures. I mean, the only way that we were able to make it this far is through cooperation and being together. So we all need at least one person that gets us, that truly cares about us, and that we can depend on, and vice versa. That being said, our purpose doesn't have to be reflected in another person. I just think of artists and I think of creative types, I mean,
Mm.
that is a huge sense of purpose. And I don't know if there's another way that you can show who you are the way artists are able to show who they are through creativity. And the
Mhm.
creativity is one of the things that we bring into not just the SMART program, but my one-on-one clients is, we really try to find, where can you express yourself in a way that is authentic and safe, and either visual or auditory, but what is a way that you can give that part of yourself to the world?
Mm.
And so we don't need other people necessarily to help us through it, but we do need to start really looking at ourselves and our relationship with ourselves and with the world around us.
Okay, I get that. I get that in the sense that, I mean, I've been through in my life a sense of not feeling purposeful, which is
Mhm.
what led me to do the work I'm
Yeah,
doing now.
here we
And
are.
and that just making that change in my life, it didn't depend on other people. It was just within
Mhm.
me. I had to listen to what was going on in myself to be able to now express myself through the work that I do. Whereas before I didn't feel like I could do that. It wasn't a deep feeling inside of me. It wasn't filling that need inside of me. So I can understand it in that way, and it makes a lot of sense. And I know I'm not alone. I know there are a
Mm-mm.
lot of women who will understand this and
Mhm.
who will take this to heart and understand that that is such an important thing that we need to pay attention to.
Mhm.
I think sometimes we get lost in like, oh, but everything is perfect, everything is fine. I shouldn't be upset, I shouldn't be complaining.
Oh,
I
yeah.
went through that too, but I'm like, but there's still something missing, still something I'm not expressing. There's something I need to do here. And it was in finding that I felt better, even though everything else, yeah, it was great in my life. There was
Yep.
still that.
It's the
Yeah.
difference between the looking at responsibilities and tasks versus looking at things based on your values.
Mm.
And that's the shift. The should statements come from, kind of the nuts and bolts of it, right? Because should you be living based on your purpose and your values and your meaning? Yes, we should, but are we, and like that's kind of the shift here, is that if that is your foundation for how you live your life, am I living, based on my values and what is resonating with my authenticity, then the other questions fall into place much easier. And
Okay.
those should statements are really a product of, there's a lot that goes into there, societal pressures, our past experiences, what we think of ourselves and maybe what we are capable of doing versus not capable of doing, or what we want to be doing. So there's a lot that goes into that question. But really, if we look at our time based on the value of what it is, then it's easier to set boundaries. It's easier to say, yes, this is resonating with me. Yes, this is consistent. Yes, this is congruent, or no, it's not.
Yeah. And that this is important.
Mhm.
I think sometimes we think what's important is those external things sometimes, or the money that we're making, or but sometimes the importance is a feeling that's inside, that we know
Mhm.
that this is important.
And that may be, that
Yeah.
may be what is important, and that's fine.
Hmm.
But if you are at the point where you are feeling burnt out, then a reevaluation is warranted. But if you're
Yeah.
happy and everything's great and
Hmm.
you're absolutely knock yourself out. But if you're really noticing something that's missing, then it's time to reassess and reevaluate. And that's where it starts, is just like evaluating where you are.
Okay. Okay. That was so good. Okay. So values is very important, and we
Mhm.
don't place a lot of value on values sometimes, so we need to do that. So now I want to come back though to perimenopause, because this is
Yes.
a big piece of this. So burnout and perimenopause do have things in common, and the symptoms can be similar. How can we tell the difference between the two? How do we know what we're going through?
Yep. It's such, I feel like, I mean, now I'm in my 40s too, I'm experiencing this too. And it's very complicated. And I think part of what makes it very complicated is that we don't have a lot of research and data on perimenopause. I actually looked up a few statistics, and because I knew it was low, but I was actually shocked by how low. So NIH is the biggest funding for any sort of health research, and they have different categories of specialties of and where they budget their money. And periodically they add in a specialty when it becomes important enough, or enough of a distinction between other categories to warrant its own category for funding.
Mm.
And I looked at menopause. Perimenopause is not a category. Menopause was determined to be a category. Guess which year?
I'm afraid to say, but I'm sure it's very recent.
2022.
Oh my gosh, that's
I
really
know.
recent.
It's
Two
really
years?
bad. Yes, that doesn't mean
That's
it hasn't been
terrible. Okay.
studied. It's
Yes.
been, under women's health, or, other things, cardiovascular, or, it has been studied, but it has not had its own category until 2022. And so we've only had a couple years. And I looked at how much funding that's actually getting, and it's getting $56 million of the 2022, I think it was 2024 budget, of $46.7 billion. So it's
Oh, wow.
getting 0.1%
Mm-hmm.
for something that affects every single, in the US, 51% of the population is going to go through this. That you're going to go through this. And if you're not, why you're not going through this.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's not like we can give you risk factors for things like cancer, cardiovascular disease. We know every woman is going to be going through perimenopause and menopause, but there isn't a lot of research. And the physicians that are menopause literate mostly have taken upon themselves to learn about this because they see it's a high need area. It's not a subspecialty within medicine. It's
Mm-hmm.
not even a specialty within medicine.
No.
So when we go to our doctor, as I did, with a whole bunch of symptoms, and they're trying to whittle away and trying to come up with what is the problem here, there isn't really an adequate test to say that you are in perimenopause or not. Because you can test your estrogen, you can test your testosterone, you can test those levels, but because they are so relative and they're unique to you and what you have been through, unless you have something to compare it to, then they don't really give you a whole lot more of a direction for treatment. And this is where a menopause literate physician comes in, because they have looked over the evidence that's there. They have gone to all the seminars. They understand what to do about perimenopause and can offer different solutions. So when you have this list of symptoms and you say, okay, I feel lack of motivation, and I have fatigue, and I have muscle soreness, and I have brain fog, and my menstrual cycle is off, all of those things can also be contributed to stress, to burnout. They can be contributed to other things. So because we don't have a clear point of a clear path from assessment to diagnosis to treatment, it's very difficult to work through all of that with a doctor that is not menopause literate. And so what do you do, right?
Yeah.
So my suggestion is, one, find a menopause literate doctor and start there, because the burnout stuff may be a product of hormone imbalance. Your brain fog may be a product of hormone imbalance. Your muscle soreness may not be depression or stress. It may be a product of hormone imbalance. So it makes sense to start there and get those hormones back in balance and reassess. That being said, there is also no downside to starting this path of self-evaluation and learning how to manage stress and deal with stress, and also how to identify your own value system and your own measure of meaning in your life. You can do those things in a parallel path. It's important, though, that one is a medical condition, and two is that you really should be seeing your doctor about. Two, the burnout, a therapist can be a huge advocate and very helpful. And if you were going to start with a professional there, you could start with someone like me who knows what to look for, or a therapist that specializes in that. But this is kind of where we are if we don't have the data to really drive decisions from our doctors.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot there. So if you're in your 40s or
Yes.
50s and going and having symptoms, it could be perimenopause, menopause, or it could be burnout, or it could be something else for sure.
Or it could be both.
Or it could be both. But I guess what you're saying is the first line of defense is to go to a menopause literate doctor.
Yeah.
Somebody
You
who
always
would
want to
know
address that first.
Yeah.
Yep. Get
So
that.
if you
Get the
find
hormones
yourself at
balanced.
this age, or even if you suspect that your hormones are not balanced for whatever reason, because it can occur as early as 35. So there are women going through perimenopause earlier. If you suspect that's what it is, that's a good place to start. Find somebody. And I know that there are people on the NAMS, what the North American Menopause Society has a directory of menopause literate doctors. I just did a podcast episode with a clinic that opened up here in Montreal, where I am, that just deals with menopause. So it's really good. There's more and more of these people out there that we can go see, but that is a first line of defense. So yes, it might be burnout, but if you happen to be at this age, go and
100%.
get yourself checked. Okay.
Yes, 100%.
That is really good.
And you're right. It is becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, it really, and I remember talking to my mom. My mom is 75, and she was just saying, we didn't have any of this stuff. Nothing. And there is so much more now than my parents' generation had, my mom's generation had. So you have to look for it and you have to ask for it. But yes, you should be able to have access to it. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we can all find that. We can all look for that and find it, not somewhere that's fairly close to you.
Mhm.
So, okay. So we've talked about perimenopause and versus burnout, but you deal with burnout and you deal with a particular program, which in the
Mhm.
intro I mentioned, which is a SMART program. So what is the SMART program? How does it work?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about
Sure,
that? Yeah.
absolutely. So SMART stands for Stress Management and Resiliency Training Program, and it was developed out of the psychologist, psychiatrists at Harvard Medical School. And it's been studied. They've studied it because they have the Mind Body Institute and Mass General. They've had access to research tools, and they've actually studied this. So this is a proven program that decreases stress, that decreases some of those markers, those biological markers like blood pressure, heart rate variability that go along with both acute and chronic stress. But it's also a great starting place for burnout too, because we have a lot of assessments. And so the way that I teach it, it's all online. It's in an on-demand format, so you can go at your own pace. And we talk about everything. It's 78 modules. It's about 10 weeks if you go week by week. And we have live sessions where you can talk to me, talk to other people. We build a nice little community. And you have the manual that they've created. It's over 200 pages that's yours. And we work through all these different aspects. We also bring in a lot of lifestyle medicine. So we talk about nutrition as it relates to stress, as it relates to brain health, as it relates to hormone health. We talk about sleep and how to actually get better sleep and how to get into a routine and identify those things that are affecting our sleep. And we talk about how to look at things based on energy rather than just tasks, and what's draining our energy versus what's giving us energy. So we have a lot of assessments throughout the program that makes it very individual. So you can really do a self-assessment to say, okay, I'm here and I need to be here, or I want to be here. And then we have the tools in place to help you along. So we talk about mindfulness, we talk about meditation, but we also talk about exercise, and we talk about friends, and we talk about work. All of these things that are all elements of your life, those come into play, which is why it's such a great place to start, because you're hedging your bets. It's already been studied, it's already been proven, and you can take what you learn from here and keep going.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that as a starting point. I think that is so impactful.
Mhm.
I do work with women in midlife, so as a coach, and a lot of the things that you work on in that program are things that I address in coaching as well, like nutrition and exercise and stress and sleep. These are all big areas that we
Yes.
coach on through there. So I know the importance of those things. I know how much they impact each other. So I think that sounds like a really complete kind of program to
Yes.
really get an understanding of where, like you said, where you are and where you want to be. I think
I
that's
love
good.
teaching this. I love, and everybody brings something to the table. And we've gotten great feedback, we've gotten great reviews on it, and it's really been a life-changing event for many people.
Oh yeah. And like you said, it's backed by science.
And it's
This
backed
is
by
really,
science.
yeah, it's all
Yes.
backed by science, which I love being a
Yes.
scientist at
Same.
at heart.
Same.
So I think that's so important. So, anything else you think we should know about burnout before I
I
move
think that's a
forward?
great summary. And I think I would just, women have, especially in this age, I think been gaslighted for many, many,
Mhm.
many years. And the one thing I will say is we know ourselves. You know yourself. And and trusting that something isn't quite right. I mean, I had to go through two doctors before I got my menopause stuff, my perimenopause stuff squared away.
Wow.
And advocating for yourself is a necessity, because it's not in the forefront of our doctors' minds. It has to be in the forefront of your minds. But do not neglect this part of your life, because it's fantastic and you deserve to feel fantastic.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's it. We have to take it seriously. We have to, like you said, it's not in the forefront necessarily of our doctors' minds. And so it is something we have to bring up if we suspect anything, if we have questions about it, we need to bring it up and advocate for ourselves. And if it doesn't work with one doctor, we can move on to another one and we can
Yep.
try to get the answers we're looking for. So I think that is a really important piece of this too. So there's a question I always ask my guests, and
Mhm.
it is, what is the best part of getting older for you?
You know, I, for me, one of the major shifts has been in making the distinction between achievement and success. And I think in our society, we oftentimes equate the two, that if we achieve certain markers, that we've been successful. And that may be congruent for many people. For me, it was not. I needed to distinguish between my achievements of building a successful practice and, selling a successful practice and all of those things from the success of what I really wanted out of my life. And because of that, I make different decisions. My son is 4 years old. He could be in pre-K every day, and I've chosen to spend 2 days of the week with him instead of working. Has it been a financial sacrifice? Yes. Has it been a workplace sacrifice? Yes. But I've also been successful in a way that I've wanted to be successful. And being able to distinguish the difference between, is this an achievement or is this a measure of my personal success, has been a very life-changing distinction for me. And it's driven many of my decisions
Wow.
without
I have
regret, I will
I
say.
have never had that answer before. So I
Oh,
really love it. And because it is so important to define the difference for yourself. Like,
yes.
we have achievements, and their successes as well. They can be synonymous,
Mhm.
but the success does not have to be synonymous with achievement. So
No, and both can be celebrated. That's the
yes,
thing. Both
yes,
can be celebrated and should be celebrated. But for me, it was very important to make my decisions. And we talk about setting boundaries, like something has to be fueling those decisions. And that was a very clear one for me.
yeah. No, that's really important. I think every woman needs to have her own definition for success. What is success for her? And it doesn't have to have anything to do with that, with the external stuff
Mhm.
that sometimes we think about as success, but that it can be is something that you feel inside, that you feel like, this is something that I feel like is a success for me.
Yep, that means
So
something to me.
yeah, exactly. That has a
That deep
purpose,
part,
that
like what you were
has,
saying, just that deep
yeah,
part.
that deep part, that's the part that we want to find,
Mhm.
that I do think is missing. So, and that will prevent burnout if you can
Yeah. Yep.
tap into that.
Yep. For sure. For sure.
So, if there's women in my audience who do want to get in touch with you, who want to find out more
Mhm.
about you or your work, where can they do that?
They can go to my website, thewellnesscabinet.co, not com, co. Or they can find me on LinkedIn, Camilla Moore. I'm on LinkedIn. I have two freebies for your listeners. I have a stress mastery video, how to have less stress, more energy, and more time for whatever you want, all without sacrificing yourself, your work, or your life. And I also have a free 30-minute one-on-one consultation, which I personally love because I love the one-on-one. And it just gives you a little bit of a direction. We can go through quickly what your biggest stressors are, troubleshoot them, and give you a plan. We can do that within 30 minutes. So
Mm.
those are the two ways to really reach me, and you'll have that information available to your listeners.
Okay. And I will put all that information in the show notes so that anybody who wants to get in touch with Camilla, find out more about what she does, or book a call with her, or, do this assessment, you can do that through the links in the show notes. So I really, all right now, I just want to thank you, Camilla, for
Oh,
being
you're
here
welcome.
today.
Thanks for
You
having
brought
me.
some really important distinctions. I will not forget what you said between stress, chronic stress, and burnout. I think that is the first time I've heard it iterate or I've heard it put that way.
Mhm.
So I think it's so important that we connect with that, and just the importance of connecting with ourselves and the deep part of ourselves. Those are the big takeaways I'm taking from today. So thank you
Those are
very,
great
very much.
takeaways. Yes, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me. This was great.
Thanks, Camilla.